First contact in crisis. Deep beneath the crystalline seas of Miria Prime, Ambassador Kilura swam through the emergency council chambers, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with anxiety. The massive holographic display dominating the center of the room showed the approaching crystalloid fleet, each ship a jagged formation of living crystal, beautiful and deadly. The outer colonies have fallen. First Speaker Valen announced, his voice resonating through the water. The crystalloids have adapted to every defensive measure we've implemented. Their ships are now incorporating our own mineral formations into their structure. The Council of 12, representing the last major cities of the Mirian civilization, hovered in their traditional spiral formation. Their bodies, evolved for life in their planet's deep oceans, cast shifting shadows on the chamber's pearl-white walls. 17 billion of our people are already refugees, Kilura reported, her fins rippling with distress. The inner colonies can't support much more displacement. The crystalloids don't just occupy our worlds, they consume them, breaking down every mineral structure to feed their expansion. The Mirians had spent millennia building their civilization in harmony with their ocean worlds, developing technology that worked with natural processes rather than against them. Their cities were grown, not built, using carefully cultivated mineral formations. But now that very harmony made them vulnerable to an enemy that saw their worlds as nothing more than resources to be devoured. What of our allies? Asked Council Member Doran, his military markings glowing fierce red in the dim light. The archivists have sealed their borders, Velon replied. The trading collective claims they cannot risk open warfare. The crystalloids have made it clear, any civilization that aids us will be marked for consumption next. Kilura felt the despair rippling through the water, carried by the subtle electromagnetic fields all Mirians use to communicate emotions. But beneath that despair, she nursed a desperate hope. There might be one option left, she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs of defeat. All eyes turned to her as she manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up a series of intercepted transmissions. 3 cycles ago, our deep space arrays detected these broadcasts. They come from a species that calls themselves human, from a water-rich world they call Earth. The chamber filled with images, humans building massive structures, exploring their own oceans, launching into space. They're young as a spacefaring species, Kilura continued, but look at how they solve problems. They don't just adapt to their environment, they reshape it while still preserving its core essence. They create solutions no other species has conceived. A primitive species, Doran scoffed, against the crystalloids. A species that has survived and thrived despite being surrounded by forces that should have destroyed them, Kilura countered. Their world has extreme temperature variations, crushing atmospheric pressure, and constant geological upheaval. Yet they've turned these challenges into opportunities. They don't think like us, or like the crystalloids. They think sideways. She played more recordings. Humans diving to ocean depths that would crush most species, building cities in deserts and Arctic wastes, turning the very forces that threaten them into sources of power. The crystalloids defeat us because they can predict how we'll react, Kilura argued. They understand our harmony-based technology because it follows patterns they can analyze. But humans? They're perfectly capable of harmony, yet they also embrace chaos when needed. They'd break patterns deliberately to find new solutions. First Speaker Valen's bioluminescence flickered thoughtfully. Even if you're right, they're beyond our reach. We have no way to contact them directly. Actually, Kilura's patterns pulsed with intensity. I've been working with our remaining quantum communications team. We've found a way to modify our distress beacon to reach their world. It would take most of our remaining power reserves, but the power reserves meant to sustain our shield networks. Doran interrupted. You would leave us defenseless on a gamble. We're already defenseless, Kilura shot back. Our shields buy us days, perhaps weeks. The crystalloids will breach them eventually. They always do. We need something they can't predict, can't adapt to. We need humans, Silence filled the chamber as the council processed her words. Above them, through the transparent dome of the chamber, they could see the shield network shimmer as it held back the crushing pressure of the deep ocean, a pressure that would soon be the least of their concerns. Finally, Velon spoke. "Show us your transmission plan." As Kilara laid out the technical details, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. The crystalloids understood patterns, prediction, and logical progression. But humans, from what she'd seen in their transmissions, humans had a gift for defying logic itself. They would need that gift, because in 26 days, the crystalloid fleet would arrive in full force. And if humans couldn't help them find an impossible solution, there wouldn't be any Mirians left to save. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. As the massive power cores of Miria Prime were redirected to fuel her transmission, Kilara composed humanity's first contact with another intelligent species. Not a message of greeting or peaceful exchange, but a desperate plea that would echo across the light years. To the species known as human, "We are the Mirian civilization, and we need your help. Our worlds are falling. Our people are dying. If you can hear us, if you can reach us, please. You're our only hope." The message launched into the void, carrying with it the fate of an entire civilization. Now all they could do was wait, and hope that humanity would prove to be as remarkable as Kilara believed they were. The human element. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the United Earth Council, her holographic presentation showing the crystalline structure of the alien threat. The chamber was packed with representatives from every major nation, all gathered within the Singapore Space Center's main assembly hall. The crystalloids, as the Mirians call them, aren't just ships or weapons, she explained, rotating the complex molecular diagram. They're a silicon-based collective consciousness that processes information through crystalline matrices. They don't just attack worlds, they convert them into extensions of themselves. Admiral James Rodriguez leaned forward in his seat. "Doctor, we've got less than 3 weeks before these things hit the Mirian home system. With all due respect, we need solutions, not lectures on alien biology." Sarah smiled. "That's exactly why understanding their biology matters, Admiral. Everyone else has tried to fight the crystalloids with conventional weapons, but you can't beat a crystal by shooting at it. You just create more surfaces, more patterns for them to adapt to and absorb." She switched the display to show the Mirian underwater cities. The Mirians have been fighting defensively, trying to shield themselves. The archivists tried to encrypt their technology. The trading collective attempted to buy them off with resources. All logical approaches, and all failed. "And you have an illogical approach?" asked Ambassador Wong, her eyes sharp with interest. "We have a human approach." Sarah gestured, and the display changed to show Earth's oceans. "We've spent centuries dealing with our own crystalline problems. Salt deposits in our oceans, scale buildup in our pipes, mineral accumulation in our bodies. We don't just fight these problems, we disrupt the fundamental processes that cause them." The display shifted to show a series of molecular simulations. The crystalloids maintain their consciousness through perfectly ordered lattice structures. But Earth's oceans taught us something crucial. In nature, perfect order is often the most fragile state of all. Understanding began to dawn on Admiral Rodriguez's face. "You want to destabilize them." "Better." Sarah's eyes gleamed. "I want to introduce chaos into their order. Not by fighting them, but by changing the rules of the game entirely. And for that, we'll need the Mirians' help." The next hour was filled with technical details, contingency plans, and more than a few heated arguments. But as the council session ended, Earth had made its decision. Humanity would answer the Mirians' call, not with battleships and armies, but with something far more powerful. An idea that could only have come from a species that had evolved on a world where adaptation meant survival. When the human response reached Miria Prime, Kilara could hardly believe what she was hearing. "They want us to do what?" "Transform our cities," Velon repeated, studying the human transmission with a mixture of confusion and fascination. They say we need to alter the crystalline structure of our mineral formations in a very specific way. But that would destabilize everything we've built. Doran protested. Our cities are precisely engineered to withstand the ocean pressures. The patterns maintaining our infrastructure are exact for a reason. That's exactly the point, Kilara realized, her bioluminescent patterns brightening with sudden understanding. The crystalloids defeat us because they can predict and adapt to our patterns. But if we introduce controlled instability, the human plan was audacious, borderline insane by Mirian standards. It called for them to modify their entire approach to architectural engineering, to embrace imperfection as a weapon. The humans weren't just sending help, they were bringing their entire chaos-embracing philosophy with them. The first human ships arrived 3 days later. They were unlike anything the Mirians had ever seen. No standardized designs, no perfect symmetry, each vessel a unique combination of function and improvisation. Leading them was the UES Entropy, carrying Dr. Sarah Chen and her team of crystallographers, marine engineers, and what she called professional chaos consultants. Kilara met them in a specially prepared chamber, her translator working overtime to keep up with the rapid-fire exchange of ideas. The humans moved with an energy that seemed to crackle through the water, their environmental suits adorned with tools and modifications that spoke of constant tinkering and improvement. "Your cities are beautiful," Sarah said, studying the flowing mineral formations with genuine appreciation. "But right now, that beauty is also your weakness. The crystalloids can read these patterns like we read books, so we're going to teach them to read nonsense." The plan they unveiled was both brilliant and terrifying. The humans had developed a way to introduce controlled imperfections into crystalline structures, imperfections that would spread like a virus through any attempting to absorb them. But implementing it would require the Mirians to fundamentally change their relationship with their environment. "You're not just asking us to modify our cities," Kilara realized. "You're asking us to rethink our entire civilization." Sarah's expression was gentle but firm. Sometimes survival requires evolution. The question is, are you willing to embrace chaos to preserve your essence? As the human teams began setting up their equipment, Kilara watched them work with growing amazement. They approached problems with a flexibility that bordered on artistry, finding solutions in places no Mirian would have thought to look. When traditional tools didn't work, they invented new ones. When standard procedures failed, they created new procedures. But most importantly, they'd brought something the Mirians had almost lost: hope. Because in less than 2 weeks, the crystalloids would arrive in force. And this time, they would find something very different waiting for them. A fusion of Mirian harmony and human chaos that would change the course of galactic history forever. Operation Stormbreaker. The crystalloid advance fleet arrived ahead of schedule. From the command center of Miria Prime, Kilara watched as the first wave of crystal ships emerged from hyperspace, their faceted forms refracting the light of distant stars. "Right on time," Sarah Chen muttered, her environmental suit's sensors tracking the crystalline formations. "They're already trying to analyze our defensive patterns." The past 12 days had transformed Miria Prime. Under human guidance, the Mirians had introduced controlled imperfections into their city's crystalline structures, microscopic flaws that formed what Sarah called a cascade matrix. Each flaw was precisely calculated to trigger a chain reaction in any crystalloid system that tried to absorb it. Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled through the quantum comm. "Remember, people, we only get one shot at this. Once they adapt, it's over." "Dr. Chen, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" Sarah's fingers danced over her holographic interface. "They're exactly as arrogant as we hoped. Look at how they're extending their sensor tendrils. They think they already know everything about Mirian crystal engineering." The first crystalloid ships entered the outer defense perimeter. As expected, they began their standard absorption process, extending crystalline filaments to analyze and copy the Mirian defensive structures. Kilara felt her heart race as she watched the enemy doing exactly what they'd done to so many other worlds. "Now," Sarah commanded. Deep beneath the oceanic cities, human engineers activated their modified resonance generators. The devices, built from a combination of Earth and Marian technology, began emitting specific frequencies that traveled through the water and into the crystal structures of the cities themselves. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The crystalloid ships continued their advance, their crystalline forms growing as they absorbed and adapted to what they thought was normal Marian technology. Then, almost imperceptibly, something changed. "There," Sarah pointed to the readings. "The cascade is starting. Watch their formation patterns." The leading edge of the crystalloid fleet began to show subtle distortions. Their usually perfect geometric forms developed tiny irregularities that began to spread and multiply. The crystalloids, true to their nature, tried to analyze and adapt to these new patterns. But that was exactly what the humans had counted on. "They can't help themselves," Sarah explained, her voice tense with excitement. "They have to understand and incorporate every pattern they encounter. But these aren't patterns. They're anti-patterns. Mathematical viruses designed to create cascading errors in their crystal matrix." The effect spread through the crystalloid fleet like wildfire. Ships began to show visible deformities, their perfect symmetry dissolving into chaos. Some tried to retreat, but it was too late. The cascade effect had already been absorbed into their core programming. But the crystalloids weren't finished. A larger ship, previously hidden behind the advance fleet, moved forward. Its surface rippled and shifted, attempting to generate new crystal formations that could counter the human attack. "Adaptive flagship," Rodriguez announced. "They're trying to brute force a solution." "Dr. Chen." Sarah was already moving. "Initiating Phase 2. Kilara, we need your people ready." The Mirians had practiced this moment for days. At Sarah's signal, they activated the secondary resonance network. This time, instead of introducing chaos, they amplified specific harmonics within their own crystal structures. The combination of controlled chaos and precise harmony created something entirely new, a crystalline resonance that even the crystalloids couldn't predict or control. The effect on the enemy flagship was spectacular. Its attempts to adapt became increasingly erratic as it tried to process two fundamentally opposing crystal patterns simultaneously. Sections of its hull began to fracture and reshape themselves randomly. Its highly ordered consciousness unable to maintain coherence in the face of structured chaos. "They're running," someone shouted as the remaining crystalloid ships began to retreat in disarray. Their perfect formation was shattered, their usual coordinated movements replaced by almost panicked flight. But victory came with a price. The stress on the Marian cities was enormous. Crystal spires cracked, structures shifted, and warning alerts blared throughout the command center. "Structural integrity at 62% and falling," a Marian engineer reported. "The resonance patterns are affecting our own systems. Hold steady," Sarah insisted, her eyes fixed on her calculations. "We just need another 30 seconds." The next half-minute felt like an eternity as the command center shook around them. But Sarah's calculations proved correct. Just as the city's systems reached their breaking point, the last of the crystalloid ships vanished into hyperspace. In the sudden silence, Kilara found herself releasing a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. We did it." Sarah's smile was visible even through her suit's faceplate. Phase 1 worked exactly as planned. But this was just the advance fleet. The main force will be here in less than a week, and they'll be ready for our tricks. But we proved it's possible. Admiral Rodriguez's voice was firm. "For the first time in history, someone's made the crystalloids retreat. Now we build on that." As the humans and Mirians began assessing damage and preparing for the bigger battle to come, Kilara noticed something extraordinary. The patterns of damage throughout the city, while significant, weren't random. The controlled chaos introduced by the humans had created new formations, new possibilities that no one, not even the humans, had predicted. "Look," she said, pointing to where several collapsed crystal structures had reformed into something new. "The city. It's not just surviving. It's evolving." Sarah studied the readings with growing excitement. "This is better than we hoped. Your cities aren't just accepting the chaos we introduced. They're learning from it, creating hybrid structures that are stronger than either of our original designs." As teams of humans and Mirians worked together to stabilize and rebuild, Kilara realized that this was more than just a victory against the crystalloids. It was the beginning of something entirely new, a fusion of human adaptability and Mirian harmony that neither civilization could have achieved alone. But they would need every bit of that innovation in the days to come, because the main crystalloid fleet was still coming. And next time, they wouldn't underestimate the power of human ingenuity combined with Mirian wisdom. The turning point. 6 days after the retreat of the advance fleet, Sarah Chen hadn't slept for nearly 48 hours. The main display in the emergency command center showed hundreds of crystalloid ships emerging from hyperspace, far more than their projections had anticipated. "They've combined multiple fleet groups," Admiral Rodriguez reported through the quantum link. "They're not taking any chances this time." The crystalloid armada filled the holographic display, their ships arranged in a new formation that none of their analysts had seen before. Instead of their usual geometric patterns, they formed a constantly shifting, almost fluid arrangement that seemed designed to minimize exposure to resonance attacks. "They've learned," Kilara observed, her bioluminescence pulsing with concern. "They're deliberately introducing randomness into their own formations." Sarah nodded grimly. "They're trying to beat us at our own game. But they're still thinking like crystals, trying to find patterns in chaos. That's going to be their downfall." The past week had transformed Miria Prime. The hybrid crystal structures that had emerged from their first battle had continued to evolve, creating formations that were neither purely Mirian nor traditionally crystalline. The humans had worked around the clock, incorporating these new patterns into their defense plans. But now everything was about to be tested. The main crystalloid fleet was advancing, led by 3 massive ships that dwarfed anything seen in the previous encounter. "Energy spike," a sensor operator called out. "There." The attack came without warning. Instead of attempting to absorb the Mirian defenses, the crystalloids launched a devastating barrage of energy weapons. The city's shields buckled under the assault, and several outer sections began to crack under the pressure. "They're not trying to consume us this time," Duran realized. "They mean to shatter us completely." "Initiating countermeasures," Sarah announced, but her voice carried an edge of uncertainty. The resonance generators powered up, broadcasting the same frequencies that had proved so effective before. But this time, the crystalloids were ready. Their ships' surfaces rippled and reformed, creating interference patterns that disrupted the resonance waves. Worse, they began emitting their own frequencies, turning the waters around Miria Prime into a chaos of competing vibrations. "Our defensive grid is failing," a Mirian engineer reported. "Crystal integrity down to 40% and falling." Sarah's fingers flew across her controls, trying to adjust the frequencies, but nothing seemed to work. The crystalloids had adapted too well, too quickly. They were using humanity's own tactics against them, and winning. That's when Kilara noticed something strange. "Sarah, look at the damage patterns in Sector 7. Where the competing resonances met, the city's crystal structures weren't just breaking, they were transforming. The hybrid formations they'd discovered after the first battle were responding to the chaos in unexpected ways, creating new patterns that somehow incorporated both order and disorder." Sarah's eyes widened as she studied the readings. This shouldn't be possible. The crystal matrices are self-organizing into quantum superposition states. They're existing in multiple patterns simultaneously. "In human words, please," Rodriguez demanded. "The crystals aren't choosing between order and chaos. They're becoming both at once. The crystalloids can't adapt because there's nothing fixed to adapt to." Sarah's voice rose with excitement. Kilara, can your people handle a complete power redirect? Handle it. We'll be defenseless. No, Sarah's eyes gleamed. We'll be everything at once. Admiral, get your ships ready to broadcast on all frequencies I'm sending now. Kilara, I need every power source you have channeled into the city's crystal matrix. It was dangerous, borderline suicidal. But they had no choice. As the crystalloid fleet pressed their advantage, the humans and Mirians executed Sarah's desperate plan. Every power source in the city was redirected into the crystal structures, while the human ships began broadcasting a carefully calculated sequence of resonance patterns. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The hybrid crystals that formed the city's structure began to pulse with energy, each one shifting through countless patterns per second. The water around Miria Prime became a kaleidoscope of refracted light and energy. When the crystalloids tried to analyze and adapt to these patterns, their own crystalline consciousness became caught in an infinite loop of possibility. Their ships began to stutter in space, their perfectly ordered minds unable to process a system that existed in all states simultaneously. Look, Kilara pointed to the largest crystalloid vessels. Their surfaces were becoming increasingly chaotic, shifting between different crystalline states as they tried desperately to find a stable pattern to lock onto. But there was no stable pattern, only endless possibility. The effect spread through the crystalloid fleet like a shockwave of uncertainty. Ships began to break formation, their collective consciousness fragmenting as it encountered something it had never faced before. True quantum chaos, a state of being that was simultaneously ordered and disordered. The three massive command ships were the first to fall, their crystalline structures dissolving into clouds of shimmering dust as their consciousness failed to maintain coherence. Without their leadership, the rest of the fleet fell into disarray. Some ships simply stopped moving, their consciousness trapped in recursive loops. Others fled blindly, their perfect geometric forms distorted beyond recognition. But victory came at a tremendous cost. The power surge had pushed Miria Prime's infrastructure to its absolute limit. Entire sections of the city were transforming, becoming something neither human nor Mirian science fully understood. We need to power down now, Sarah warned, or we'll lose the whole city. The shutdown sequence was as dangerous as the power-up had been. As the energy levels decreased, the quantum state of the city's crystals began to collapse back into normal space-time. But they weren't returning to their original form. Instead, they were settling into something new, a perfect fusion of order and chaos, strength and adaptability. As the last crystalloid ships vanished from their sensors, Kilara swam to one of the observation windows. The city around them had changed forever. The once rigid crystal spires now flowed like liquid glass, maintaining their strength while constantly shifting in subtle ways that caught and bent the light from above. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Sarah approached, her own exhaustion evident even through her environmental suit. "It's evolution. Your cities aren't just buildings anymore. They're living systems, capable of adapting to any threat." The crystalloids couldn't understand it, because they couldn't understand true change. They could only copy and consume. But your people just became something entirely new. Admiral Rodriguez's voice came through the calm, tired but satisfied. The quantum readings suggest the crystalloid consciousness was completely destabilized. They won't be coming back, not to this sector of space anyway. As humans and Mirians began the work of understanding and stabilizing their transformed world, Kilara realized that they had gained something far more valuable than just victory. They had discovered a new way of existing, a balance between chaos and order that neither civilization had imagined possible before they came together. The crystalloids had failed because they could only think in absolutes, perfect order or total chaos. But humanity had shown the Mirians a different path, the ability to be both, to change without losing oneself, to find strength in adaptation rather than rigid perfection. It was a lesson that would reshape not just Mirian society, but the future of human-alien relations throughout the galaxy. Legacy of Two Worlds. 3 months after the crystalloid defeat, the Great Hall of Myria Prime hosted an unprecedented gathering. Representatives from 24 spacefaring civilizations floated or stood in the transformed chamber, their environmental suits adapted to the Myrian ocean environment. They had come to witness something remarkable: the formal alliance between humanity and the Myrian civilization. The hall itself was a testament to what that alliance had already achieved. The crystal structures no longer followed rigid geometric patterns, but flowed like frozen waves, constantly shifting in subtle ways that maintained perfect structural integrity, while never remaining exactly the same from one moment to the next. It was neither purely ordered nor chaotic, but a beautiful fusion of both principles. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's chief xenotechnology advisor, stood beside Kilara as they prepared to address the gathered delegates. Above them, through the transparent dome, ships from various civilizations orbited in careful formation, including several vessels from the once reluctant Trading Collective and Archivist Alliance. "Funny how quickly they changed their minds about getting involved," Sarah remarked quietly. Kilara's bioluminescent patterns shifted in what Sarah had learned was the Myrian equivalent of wry amusement. Nothing motivates potential allies quite like success, though I suspect they're more interested in our new crystal technology than in friendship. Can you blame them? Sarah gestured to the living architecture around them. "What we achieved here goes beyond weapons or defenses. We've created a whole new way of working with crystalline structures. The applications for everything from computing to construction are endless." The gathering fell silent as first speaker Valen moved to address the assembly. His form, like that of all Myrians now, showed subtle changes. Their natural bioluminescence had begun interacting with the quantum crystal structures in their cities, creating patterns of light that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. 3 months ago, our civilization faced extinction. Valon began, his voice carrying clearly through the water and the delegates' translation systems. The crystalloids had consumed dozens of our worlds, and our remaining colonies were under siege. We had tried everything we knew, everything our allies could suggest, and nothing worked. He paused, his patterns shifting to express deep emotion. Then we found humanity. Not the strongest species, not the most advanced, not even the most numerous. But they were exactly what we needed, because they understood something that we, in all our centuries of civilization, had forgotten. True strength lies not in perfection, but in adaptation. Sarah stepped forward to continue the presentation, activating a holographic display that showed the transformed Myrian cities. What you see around you isn't just a new form of architecture or technology. It's a new way of thinking about the relationship between order and chaos, between stability and change. The display shifted to show data from the civilian sector. Myrian society, once rigidly structured, had begun to evolve in unexpected ways. The quantum crystal technology had applications in everything from medicine to art, and the fusion of human and Myrian approaches had led to breakthroughs in fields neither species had anticipated. But perhaps most importantly, Kilara added, we've discovered something about the nature of civilization itself. The crystalloids failed not because they weren't powerful enough, but because they couldn't understand true evolution. They could only copy and consume, never create anything genuinely new. The implications weren't lost on the assembled delegates. The Trading Collective's representative, a tall, insectoid being, raised what might have been a hand. "And what guarantees do we have that this new power won't be used for expansion or dominance?" "Look around you," Sarah replied. "What we've created here can't be weaponized in the way you fear. It's not about domination. It's about adaptation, about finding balance. The technology itself rejects attempts to use it for purely destructive purposes. It requires cooperation, understanding, and most importantly, the willingness to change." The presentation continued with detailed technical briefings and diplomatic arrangements, but the real message had already been conveyed. The Human-Myrian Alliance represented something new in the galaxy, a partnership based not on military might or economic necessity, but on complementary ways of thinking and being. In the months that followed, the effects rippled through galactic society. The archivists began incorporating quantum crystal technology into their vast data storage systems, creating libraries that could adapt and evolve with the information they contained. The trading collective found new applications in ship design, creating vessels that could respond to space phenomena in ways previously thought impossible. But the most profound changes were happening on Myria Prime itself. The once rigid social structures of Myrian society had given way to something more fluid, while still maintaining their essential cultural identity. And humanity, through their continued cooperation with the Myrians, was learning to temper their chaos with harmony. One evening, as they watched the sunset create rainbow refractions through the quantum crystal spires, Kilara turned to Sarah. "Do you remember what you said when you first arrived? About survival requiring evolution?" Sarah nodded, smiling behind her faceplate. "I remember. I don't think any of us understood just how right you were. We thought we were fighting for survival, but we were really fighting for the right to become something more than we were." Above them, a school of Myrian children swam through the transformed city, their natural bioluminescence creating complex patterns with the quantum crystals, a completely new form of art that had emerged from the fusion of their technologies. Among them were several young humans in swimming suits, learning to communicate through light and motion in the Myrian way. That's the real legacy of what happened here, Sarah realized. Not just survival, not just victory, but proof that the greatest achievements come when different species learn from each other. The crystalloids couldn't understand that. They thought diversity was a weakness to be eliminated. And instead, it was their undoing, Kilara concluded, because they never understood that the strongest patterns are the ones that can change. As night fell on Myria Prime, the quantum crystals began their evening luminescence, creating a display that was never quite the same twice. It was a constant reminder of the lesson that had saved their world. That true strength lies not in rigid perfection or pure chaos, but in the wisdom to know when to be each, and the courage to become something entirely new when neither is enough. The story of how humanity helped save the Myrians would be told countless times across the galaxy. But the real story, the one that changed the course of galactic history, wasn't just about a single victory. It was about what happens when two civilizations trust each other enough to share not just their strengths, but their weaknesses, and in doing so, create something greater than either could have become alone. It was a lesson the galaxy wouldn't soon forget. And as humanity and the Myrians continued to explore the possibilities of their alliance, they knew they had only begun to scratch the surface of what they could achieve together.